In this video, we're going to begin working with the zero product method. Now, the zero product method can solve polynomial equations as long as you can factor them. So, for instance, with quadratic equations, the quadratic formula will always work. Sometimes, though, using the zero product method is faster. So it's not like one is always better than the other. It's more that you want both tools, both the zero product method and the quadratic formula, and then you shift back and forth depending on what you start with. The idea behind the zero product method is, if a product is zero, at least one of the factors has to be zero. For instance, here, I'm going to multiply two factors together and get zero. That means this first factor has to be zero, or the second factor has to be zero, or they're both zero. So we take the point of view that we're going to figure out what values of x will make every factor with a variable of x equal to zero. For instance, here I think you can see that if x is negative 4, then negative 4 plus 4 will be 0, and then the whole product will be 0, regardless of what this value is. And in the same way, if I let x be 2, this factor will be 0. This one won't, this will be a 6, but again it won't matter because 6 times 0 is 0. So once you get your polynomial factored and set equal to 0, then for every factor that has a variable, you can set that equal to 0 and solve and find your solutions. As always, once you find your answers, you should always check to make sure that they work. Try this one. In this case, r might be a negative 3, or a negative 2, or a positive 5. For each of those values, that individual factor will go to 0. Now the other two won't, but it won't matter because if you multiply two non-zero numbers to 0, you get 0. So here's my three solutions. Try this one. I have two factors set equal to 0. I'm going to set my first factor equal to 0, and then I'll subtract 3 from both sides and divide by 5. And here's my first solution. That's the value that will make this factor be 0. And then I take the second one, I set that factor equal to 0, I add 3 and divide by 2, and here's my other solution. How about here? Again, setting each equal to 0 and solving, I find my two solutions. Now this works great as long as someone gives us the factored form. Unfortunately, they don't come that way usually. Instead, they come as sums. And so here's a procedure that you can follow. Write the equation as a polynomial equal to 0, and then factor the polynomial, and then for every variable factor, set that equal to 0 and solve, and then check your solutions. For instance, here, I would first have to factor out the GCF of x. Here, you're going to have two solutions. The first one is going to be 0, and that one, at first, people kind of miss, but it comes right from here. I mean, if x is 0, then you will get 0 times negative 1, if you let x be 0 here, but that product will be 0. So always remember this one. And then to find this one, we set 3x minus 1 equal to 0. Add 1 to both sides and divide by 3, and we get here. Try this one. Step 1 is to set the polynomial equal to 0. Next, I'm going to factor out my GCF. I notice I have the difference of two squares. I factor that. I'll have three factors with a variable, and my answers will be 0, and 3, and -3. Well, that will conclude this first video where I have introduced the zero product method.